Hi, I am Erin Taylor, and today is November 14th, 2022. I'm going to show you my card with the names of the bones. I know you can't quite see, but you kind of get the idea. They got names, they got boxes. This side is empty. This is stickers, which I'm going to move off my desk. Okay. Hi, I'm so excited to talk to you about the bones today. So, the first thing I'm going to talk to you, so what I'm going to do is kind of get out my auxiliary information, and then I'll just really go through the bones. Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk to you about is that there's two components of the skeleton, the axial and the appendicular. So the axial is kind of the head, skull, etc., the spine, and the rib cage, right? The appendicular is going to be the little limbs, and then where the limbs attach. So there's the pectoral and the pelvic girdle. Pretty straightforward. So I also want to talk to you about the types of bones. So there's 5 types of bones. The first is flat bones. So you're gonna see flat bones up here in the skull, protecting, because their whole thing is protecting the organs. There's also the ribs are flat bones. The sternum is a flat bone. Then there's long bones. So long bones is if you picture a cartoon dog chewing on a bone, you picture a long bone, right? They're for kind of structuring the body and for helping with movement. So, an example would be the radius, the ulna, the femur, the humerus. You kind of get the idea. The next we're going to talk about is short bones. So short bones are kind of like cubey, little bones that are used for movement. So I actually used one right when I did that movement in because the carpals and the tarsals are short bones. I didn't apologize for this earlier, but I know I sound sick. Sorry, I work with kids, so you get sick all the time. Carpal, tarsal, etc. Then you get a regular bone. So these are bones that are a specific weird shape because they protect a specific organ. An example is the vertebrae because they protect the spinal cord. And then the last type is the sesamoid bone. These are bones that attach to the tendon. So the patella is an example of that. And then lastly, before I get into the bones, I wanted to talk about my clinical application. Personally, I'm planning to work in OT. There's a lot of clinical applications with skeleton because OT is so much about movement. So OT is about achieving your ADLs. This means activities of daily living. So a lot of different conditions can affect your ADLs that you may want an OT to help you with. So arthritis, bursitis could be examples. Something even like limb difference, loss of a limb, dwarfism, things like that. These can all be kind of clinical situations in OT, I would say. So let's really get into the bones. So first we're going to talk about the head, skull area. First we'll talk about the bones that protect the brain, is I guess how I would refer to them. So first right here, oh, I know it's really hard to see, I'm sorry. This is the frontal bone. Then there's the parietal bones, and then there's the occipital bone. Kind of moving in, we're going to have the temporal bone, and then we are going to have the sphenoid bone, right? So, and then there's this one. I don't know if you can see it. It's in here, it's called the foramen magnum, right? So these bones all protect the brain. Very cool. And then we kind of move on to the facial bones. So there's the mandible, the maxilla. I should be touching on the skeleton, not on my own face. Then there's the nasal bone. Nose is made of a lot of cartilage. There's a lot of bones there too. So an example is the vomer, which is kind of here, the bridge of the nose area, I suppose you would call it. Then inside there's the lacrimal and the ethmoid. Important is the cheekbones, zygomatics. I like those because it sounds like a fun invention from the 1960s. So those are our facial bones, right? So facial bones are for attachment of muscles that move the face. I'm using them right now. They are also for kind of the openings to the digestive and respiratory tract, nose and mouth. Yeah, obviously the eyes live there and the little eye cavities. You kind of get the idea. So, pretty cool. Next we'll get into, am I talking too fast? No, I'm doing great. Yeah, let's talk about the spine next, right? So the spine is made of 33 vertebrae, and there's 4 curves in the spine, which develop at different times of life, and I will talk about them, right? One thing about the spinal cord that's interesting to note, right? So obviously it protects, I said spinal cord when I meant spine, but that's perfect because it protects the spine. provide support for the body, and so on. One thing to note is that the vertebrae get bigger as you go down, kind of to provide more balance, support to the body, so on and so forth. So the first 7 vertebrae are known as the cervical curvature, so that's kind of the neck. One thing to note is that the top 2 vertebrae, first and second, are kind of differently structured to allow for movement in the head, so I'm using it right now. They are called the atlas and the axis. So excuse me for what I'm about to do, but the atlas is kind of, shaped a little bit more like a normal vertebrae, and then the axis has this like protuberance that kind of goes into here, so it can kind of like move. The protuberance, and you get the idea. Sorry for pausing to think for a second, but it makes you allowed to move the head. Oh, and the protuberance is called the odontoid process. I did remember. Okay. So that's the cervical curvature. The next is kind of the like chest, which is called the thoracic curvature. So there's 12 vertebrae in there. That's where the ribs attach. Almost said rib bones, but that's where they attach. They attach kind of back here. That's why 12 ribs. You get the idea. The third curvature is the lumbar curvature. So the lumbar curvature is the lower back. And there's 5 vertebrae there. And then kind of moving on down from there, you have the sacral curvature. So there's the sacrum and the coccyx. Sacrum is like 5 fused together vertebrae. Coccyx is the tailbone. So that's kind of the deal here with the spine. So let's move on to the rib cage. So the rib cage is interesting. So it has kind of this like middle bone here, right? So that's the sternum. So the sternum has, it's like manubrium, sternum, and then xiphoid process is that little pointy bit at the bottom, right? And then we have the ribs. So there's 12 ribs, right? And there's something important here, right? Costal cartilage. Costal cartilage is what's going to attach 10 of the ribs are either directly or indirectly attached by costal cartilage to the sternum. So the first 7 ribs are attached directly with that cartilage, right? So those are called true ribs. The next 3 are attached. You can actually kind of see they're attached indirectly, right? Attached to the cartilage, and then that attaches to kind of that main piece of cartilage. So that's 8 through 10 were numbered 1 through 12 to the bottom. And so those are known as false ribs. Did I say that already? I don't know. And then the last 2, right, are floating ribs. So they're not attached to the sternum area at all. They're only attached back here like we talked about. We are attached to the thoracic curve of the spine, thoracic vertebrae. One thing I didn't talk about while talking about cartilage is that in between each vertebrae is intervertebral discs, which are made of cartilage that make sure that the bones kind of don't rub against each other and can move more flexibly. So that's cool. Okay. But that's the rib cage. One thing about it is that it's very flexible, but also very strong, right? That's because it's made of bones and cartilage. So when we breathe, right, it can kind of move with our body. Yeah. You get the idea. So the next thing we're going to talk about real quick, I am running out of time, is but I don't want to rush myself. The pectoral girdle. So the pectoral girdle is 2 clavicles and 2 scapula, right? So this is going to be where the arms attach to the body. It's very loosely attached to kind of the rest of the skeleton. It's really only attached like here, bone to bone. So that's why it's so easy to dislocate it, right? So the next thing we're going to talk about is the arm, or I guess upper limb, which arm, hand, etc. So arm, forearm, hand, yeah. So this bone right here is the humerus, right? And then we kind of move down into the radius and the ulna. The radius is the shorter bone, ulna is the longer bone, so that's one way that you can remember them. And then in the hand, right, we have the carpals, metacarpals, and the phalanges. So the phalanges in the hand either have there are 3 phalanges in the finger or 2 in the thumb. So they're the proximal and distal phalange in the thumb, proximal closer to your body, distal further away, or in the fingers they have proximal, middle, and distal, right? And then I wanted to talk about the carpals. So there are 8 carpals, and they are called the scaphoid, the lunate, the trapezium, the trapezoid, the capitate, the triquetrum, and the pisiform. And they're all kind of there. Only two of them actually attach. Oh, I'm not showing you them at all. Only two of them actually attach physically to the like ulnar radius arm structure, and the rest are like attached to those. So that's that on that. So then we can talk next about the pelvic girdle. The pelvic girdle is made up of two coxal bones, and the sacrum and the coccyx are really a part of the pelvic girdle too. So the coxal bones make it up, right? There's the kind of they can be divided into three parts. The ilium, right? The ischium makes it possible for you to sit kind of back here, and then the pubis area. And in people who have a uterus and people who don't, the structure is kind of functionally different because people who have a uterus give birth, right? So it's kind of like thinner in a person with a uterus, thicker in a person who doesn't have one, and kind of has some other traits like within there. But it has another function other than, you know, expanding when you give birth. I guess it doesn't expand, which is that it's where the lower limbs attach to the body. So let's go lower limbs. So these, right, are the femurs. This is the patella, the kneecap. So we talked about it was a sesamoid bone, right? And then we go down into the leg. There's the fibula and the tibia. The fibula is the thinner bone, but I've been remembering which one it is because fibula sounds like nebula. Nebulas are out in the galaxy, and the fibula is further away from the interior of the body. So if you want a weird, complicated way to remember it, that's what I recommend. So then in the foot is structured similarly to the hand. We're going to have the tarsals, the metatarsals, and the phalanges, right? Phalanges being the toes instead of the fingers. They can also be called digits, which I think is interesting. And so same deal, we have these tarsal bones that have special names, which I'm going to tell you. They're the calcaneus, the talus, the navicular, the cuboid, the lateral cuneiform, intermediate cuneiform, and medial cuneiform make up our feet. So you kind of get the idea. That's kind of what I have for you today. That's our like skeleton from top to bottom. Thank you, skeleton, for showing us all your bones. I think that is all that I have to say, which is great because I'm already over time limit. But thank you for letting me tell you about the bones. I hope that I did them justice and remembered to say everything that I wrote in my little study guide.